Avast ye swabs, and an R to you. We're pirates all. Come join our crew. Hey everybody, welcome back to Deep in Bear Country. Look, it's me, it's Phil Gonzalez. So, some people have been saying to me, and by some people I mean Alana, and by Alana I mean my lovely love, have been saying to me that it's kind of disorienting to have me constantly referring to being on a video when you're just listening to me. So I'm going to say it right off the top. I'm on a video. And if you want to see me on a video, just go to YouTube. Look up this book. Look up Phil Gonzalez. Look up my channel. It says it's Phil right on the logo. It's Phil. It's got a little picture of me. It's Phil. It's not going to be a very accurate picture of me for long because I'm getting new glasses. I haven't gotten it. Well, I have got. It's a long story. I'm not gonna change the logo though. I'm gonna keep the logo looking like that. But go to YouTube, search Phil Gonzalez, search Berenstain Bears. I'll come up, and then you can watch me move around. You can watch me wiggle and jiggle. That's all you really want, right? Well, welcome. What are we going to talk about today? Ancient Rome? Probably not. Probably, let me just check my notes here. Ancient Rome. It's ancient Rome. We're not really going to touch much on ancient Rome. I could touch on ancient Rome, but I'm not a scholar. I'm not a learned man. I'm not very intelligent. I'm not very bright. I do like to read, though, and I do like to know about things. And one thing I like to know about is the difference between history and popular culture. And unfortunately, what we're discussing today walks that line between history and popular culture. In fact, most of what we think we know about today's subject has about 90% more to do with popular culture than with actual history. And that popular culture began while what we were discussing today was occurring. And you probably figured out from my introduction that it's pirates. We're discussing pirates today, but why are we discussing pirates today? Like, well, what's the deal? How do the Berenstain Bears tie into piracy at all? They're not pirates. Does Raffish Ralph Ripoff go on his boat and sail away and hold up? We kind of had pirates actually in the one where Raffish Ralph had no, that wasn't pirates. Was it pirates? Do we have pirates? Did Raffish Ralph ever encounter pirates? Let me know. Write in and let me know. I can't remember if Raffish Ralph ever encountered pirates. No, today's book is it's one that I've actually not been looking forward to just because I read it years ago and it wasn't one of my favorites. Today's book, let me just get out of the way. Today's book is the Berenstain Bears Pirate Adventure from 2016. And this is one of those early books that came out while I had already been doing the show for a while, but I remember when this came out. It was kind of a big deal. I remember this getting some hot press. And by hot press, I mean, I think the Berenstain Bears company mentioned it on their website. But for me, that was hot press at the time. I had my ear to the ground and I read this book. Right, I remember picking it up in the library and being like, this isn't the Berens. I don't want to read this at all. Like, I wasn't interested in it. It didn't interest me. Because it's not really, it's a Berenstain Bears book, obviously. Look at it. Look at the book. It's got the Berenstain Bears branding. It's got the Cubs right there on the cover. But then if you notice, there's like a pirate ship and pirates, and there's like thought bubbles coming out of their heads. This book mostly takes place in the imaginations of the Cubs. And there is nothing wrong with a child's imagination, unless that child is imagining some really distressing things. There's nothing wrong with a child's imagination. We love a child's imagination. Children are beautiful. They are wholly blameless creatures, unless they do terrible things. Then we can blame them. But most of all, children are blameless, except some kids. Some kids are rotten to the core. They're just born bad. But these aren't these Cubs. These Cubs are born fine. Except maybe Honey, we don't know, because she's not old enough to have manifested many of the signs. We don't know yet. Honey might be a bad egg, we don't know. In any case, most of this story takes place in the Cubs' imagination. There's a framing device of why they're imagining this, but It's about pirates. It's kind of about pirates, but it's about pop cultural pirates, not real pirates. Piracy has existed for about as long as people have been going from point A to point B. And when we think of piracy, we are, of course, talking about ocean piracy. Like piracy exists on the sea. So for as long as people have been on boats, there have been other people who want the stuff that those people have on the boats. And those people are more or less pirates. But pirates, the definition of what is a pirate has changed a lot over the years, depending on what language you're referring to, depending on what culture you're referring to, depending on whether or not those pirates are working for the government. Also, one person's pirate is another person's whatever they're called. What are they called when a country like they're your pirates? Like England had their own. I can't think of the word for it. But so depending on what the context is, pirates may or may not be pirates. So one definition of pirates was you're on a boat, you get stuff off another boat, but you also attack coastal cities. That's a big part of pirates, is they're not only attacking boats and stealing what's on the boats, they're attacking coastal cities and raiding coastal cities. But depending on the culture, that's a different thing. So in some people were not known as pirates for doing that. They were known as Vikings when they did that. They weren't pirates, they were Vikings, totally different animal, but they're pretty much doing the same thing. Sailing around, it's a political mishmash. Also, when we talk pirates, we're talking usually about the golden age of piracy, the heyday of piracy. We're talking the Caribbean, we are talking European pirates. We're not talking about pirates in antiquity. We're not talking about the Phoenicians. We're not talking the Illyrians. We're not talking Olympus or Lycia. We're not talking about the conflicts between the Illyrians and the Roman Republic. None of that. We're also not talking about the Vikings, although during the Viking Age, those Vikings were doing some piracy stuff. We're usually not talking about that. We're usually not talking about the Danes or the Moors. What we're talking about usually is Barbary pirates, Albanian piracy. We're talking Mediterranean piracy. We're talking about stuff off the coast of America, of the United States, stuff off the East Coast. We're usually not talking about Southeast Asia. We're usually not talking about East Asia. We're not talking about usually the slave trade. We have a very limited scope of what we think of as pirates, what we think of as the golden age of piracy. Privateers is the term I was looking for. Privateers, people who worked for governments. So pirates. Pirates, European pirates, classic pirates. A lot of what we think we know about pirates comes from stories written about pirates during the age of those pirates. Those stories were mostly bubkis, bunk, balderdash, ballyhoo. They usually weren't true, but they helped build up this mythology. And then in 1888, I think, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a book. Was it 1888? When was Treasure Island? Treasure Island. Robert Louis Stevenson. I'm sorry, 1882. I was a little off. I was close, though. You got to give me some cred. 1882, Robert Louis Stevenson's published a little book called The Treasure Island, originally titled The Sea Cook, a story for boys. Because what does a boy want to read about more than someone baking eggs on the sea? The Sea Cook, under the title, originally published in the children's magazine Young Folks, under the title Treasure Island or the Mutiny of the Hispaniola, credited to Captain George North. Treasure Island basically said, this is what pirates are. It said, this is what tropical islands are. It said, this is what treasures are. It said, this is what a treasure map looks like. This is how you mark where a treasure is. Also, this is what pirates are like who have one leg and parrots on their shoulder. That is what Treasure Island did. It defined pirates in modern popular culture. However, in 1950, a movie came out by the Walt Disney Company called Treasure Island. And it single-handedly continued to define what pirates were in the popular imagination. That's right. So Treasure Island, the book, was like, forget history. This is what pirates were. Long John Silver, you like him. Peg legs, you like it. Parrot on the shoulder, you love it. Shiver my timbers, let's go for it. Disney comes along, casts Robert Newton as Long John Silver in Treasured Island. Now, Robert Newton, he's from Shaftesbury. Hooligans knocked over a dustbin in Shaftesbury. No one knows what it's like to be a dustbin in Shaftesbury with hooligans. And if you know what I'm referring to when I sing that, congratulations, you listened to the same CDs that I did in the 1990s. Robert Newton was born in Shaftesbury in Dorset, England. He was a Cornwall guy. He was educated near Penzance, Cornwall, where he lived with his family. Then he went to Exeter School, yada, yada, yada. The thing is, when Robert Newton was building the character of Long John Silver, he was like, I'm going to speak in a Cornwall accent. I'm going to do an exaggeration of my own West Country accent. I am going to develop a new type of speaking, which is going to hit those hard R's of the West Country English. And we can talk all about accents if you wanted to. The Cornwall, the West Country English, especially at the time, was famous for sort of like pushing back against British accents at the time and hitting those hard. Whereas when the British developed softer R's in order, there's this whole thing with like, so accents tend to develop organically, but in England they were developed very self-consciously in order to like maintain the separation of the upper class from the lower class. It's a big story. So in any case, West Country accents decided to keep those hard R's. Crawford decided to hit those hard R's as hard as he possibly could with every fiber of his being. Sorry, I said Crawford. Robert Newton hit those hard R's with every fiber of his being. That defined what the pirate voice was for like all of history. So when Talk Like a Pirate Day hit, people were like, oh, that's what pirates talk like. But that's not what pirates sound like. Yes, there were pirates from that area of England. There were some famous pirates from that area of England. So that also plays into the stereotype. But when you think about pirates talking like this, talking with hard R's, that's just Robert Newton. That's just one guy. Not even the character of Long John Silver in the book. That's just one guy. That's how he talked. Pirates were from everywhere. Like, pirates are from all over the place. A lot of them from the Caribbean. Piracy wasn't the equal opportunity employer some people like to make it out to be, by the way. Piracy was just as prejudiced as everyone else. But there was a lot of politics in piracy. I mean, a lot of times being a pirate was a better thing to be than being a sailor. You could possibly have been treated better, earn more money, had a lot more freedom than if you were. Sailors were treated terribly. If you worked for the Navy, you were treated like absolute garbage, assuming you weren't pressed into service in the first place, in which case you may as well have just been a pirate. You had just as much chance of dying on the open sea as you did if you were a pirate, maybe a little less. And if you were a pirate, at least you get to go to pirate town to hang out with other pirates and not like be like executed by your commanding officer. It sounded like, I don't know. Piracy was not a utopia. It was not a fun thing. These were not decent human beings. But then nobody was. So piracy also existed a lot in America, like off the East Coast. There was a lot of piracy going on. What's funny is that Cornwall accent, that West Country accent, actually made it over to America. And in fact, there are places off the East Coast of America that still have, you'll hear these sort of Southern accents. I can't do them. You'll hear these sort of Southern accents that have essence of Cornwall in them. It's a rare accent. I can't remember what it's called now. I was actually watching documentaries about this just the other day. I love accents. I love that like you can still tell where people come from. What we think of as Deep South actually has a lot of Scottish, of Cornwall, of West England in it, because there's a lot of that influence still, and a lot of like sayings. You'll hear a lot of like what we think of as Australian in some of their slang. This sort of oi, hitting a lot of like oi sounds in a lot of that slang. There, it's fascinating stuff. Just get online and look it up. A lot of that, like any of those like coastal cities on the southern United States, like that East Coast, South, especially those island communities, you'll get a lot of isolation there, and you'll get a lot of like just very unique accents. Fascinating people, fascinating histories there. I don't have time to go into it. I would love to if I had a different show and I was a smart person. So the Cubs. Oh yeah, by the way, we're talking about the Berenstain Bears. So should we talk about them? Should we talk about the Berenstain Bears? I'm eager to talk about it. Let's get into it. The Berenstain Bears Pirate Adventure. I read the introduction up top, so we don't have to go back into that. What's this book about? Well, Mama and Papa, sister, brother, and honey, they all head out to Gull Island. Now, we've been to Gull Island. This is a regular place. If you're just joining me for the first time, don't know why you would be. If you're just joining me for the first time, though, Gull Island they've been going there since the early days of the Berenstain Bears. Mike has gone there with them a few times, but I believe that Stan and Jan spent some time on Gull Island. They're heading out there. They've had some adventures there. They found buried treasure there before. I believe that's where the Berenstain Bears, the story of the buried treasure was. A lot of sort of fantasy tales take place on Gull Island. But they always stay there. They always stay in a cottage. This is their big vacation every year. It's a nice place. I've been to like some coastal, like we stayed at a lakeside like house when we went up to the UP, the Upper Peninsula. But I've never gone down to like the ocean and stay. But again, we don't even know where the bears, who knows where the bears, for all we know, they live by a great lake in Bear World. So they leave their cares and their worries away, as it says here. I almost said they leave their curry. They leave their curry, they say, as they smell the curry in the air. They're looking forward to fishing. They're looking forward to playing in the waves, looking forward to digging on the beach. They get to their cottage. It's right by the dunes. This is Mike in his element. He just loves the sea. He loves the settings. He loves drawing crabs. He loves drawing birds. He loves drawing plants. And he loves drawing this picket fence. We love the beach house. It looks like a nice place to relax. I'm not a big fan of the beach. Their beach, the beach available to the bears in front of this beach house, is about 5 yards across. It's a small beach, but who cares? They're there for the fun of it. They're there to relax. The cottage is great. It's got a nautical theme. It's got lamps made out of driftwood. It's got fishing boats hung up. And best of all, there's a giant ship in a bottle above the fireplace. Now, we know that Grizzly Gramps is a ship in the bottle builder. He's that's one of his hobbies. In addition to writing angry letters to the editor and annoying his representatives, he likes to build ships in bottles. He builds them small, like collapsed. You feed them into the bottle and then you use little hooks and stuff to raise the sails. But this ship in a bottle is not a Grizzly Gramps ship in a bottle because it's a pirate ship. And as we know, Grizzly Gramps likes to stick to the letter of the law. So they unpack, they put on their swimsuits, Papa's swimsuit being straight out of the 1930s or whatnot. They start building a sandcastle, and then Sister notices something just down the beach. The Cubs all run to go check it out. Papa catches a crab, an angry crab. And lo and behold, what they find is a shipwreck. Now, some storms had swept through, and they find a wrecked fishing boat that they think must have been uncovered by the storms. I'm like, maybe that ship was wrecked in the storm, because if that ship was covered by the storms, it must have been a pretty high. Like, how much erosion occurred? This ship has like masts sticking up. It's a big ship. It's a big fishing boat. But it's not like an ancient boat. It's just a wooden fishing boat, like a modern fishing boat, like probably a few decades old, but looked like it could have still been in use. I don't know where this boat came from. It also could have been the Cubs weren't allowed to explore on their own a year ago, and now they are. Who knows? But it's a pretty cool boat. If I was a kid and I'm not going to lie. If I was an adult and I was on the beach and I found this, and there was no one else around, I'd be pretty stoked. It's got a hole in the side, like the SS Minnow from Gilligan's Island, like the fishing boat from Jaws that the human head pops through. It's got a hole in the side. So this is a real life ship. This is exciting for kids, okay? If you're exploring and you find a derelict ship like this, that's excitement. Like this is going to define your vacation. This is it. You don't have to worry about anything else. Mom and Dad, pick out your book, because you got reading to do, because the kids are entertained from this point on. Just watch out for splinters, watch out for snakes, watch out for collapsing wood. Tell them to be careful on that boat, but you can pack it in for the rest of the vacation. These kids are going to have a good time. So the Cubs decide this is their life. They're like, it's just like that ship in a bottle. And they're like, yeah, but even it's better than the ship in the bottle because this thing is a real life ship. And so brothers, let's play pirates. Now, we don't have to fill anybody in on what pirates are. The Cubs just know what pirates are from the TV shows they watch. It's really weird to me. So pirates, they exist in this place in popular culture that for me as a kid, I never understood. I could understand pirates being a big deal like during the age of piracy, because it's something that's really happening and it's out there and it's weird. It's like astronauts during the age of astronauts, which I guess still is kind of going on, but who knows? Who knows if are astronauts real? You tell me. But as a kid, I was never taken by pirates. But when you read about things, like when you would see things on like open up the world of literature, when things would try to entice children to read, they'd always be like, you can be a pirate out on the sea. And I'd be like, no, thanks. That doesn't sound interesting to me at all. I don't like the water. I don't like the idea of boats. And I don't like the idea of being a pirate. Those guys were bad guys. They did mean things and they stole and they died and they got shot and they shot others. I didn't like the idea of reading about pirates. I never wanted to read Treasure Island. I never wanted to read books that took place on boats. I was never I guess I had friends who were like, let's read the Horatio Hornblower. I don't know. Did my friends read Horatio Hornblower? I don't know. Master and Commander, I understand those are amazing books. They never interested me. I don't care about boats. I don't care about people sailing. I like the history of pirates, but I don't want to read stories about them. I even have some great books that are like ghost stories on the seven seas, like pirate boats and ghost ships and stuff. And I read like one of them and I'm like, this is really fascinating. And then I lose interest because I'm never going to be a pirate or a sailor of any kind. I'm never going to go out on the sea. I don't take an active interest in it. Well, the Cubs seem to. So brother's like, I'm Captain Cub, which I assume is like a takeoff on Captain Kidd, who was a real guy, right? Real pirate. Sister says she's Brown Bear the pirate. Not Brown Bear, Brown Bear, which I assume is based on Black Beard, who was also a real pirate. Honey, you're a pirate too. You're Honey Bones. Which, okay, now we're into fictional territory because I have to assume that Honey Bones is based on Billy Bones from Treasure Island. Which means that Treasure Island definitely exists in Bear World. Because, okay, we're not going to get much about the history of Bear World in this book because this is all taking place in their head, but we can sort of extrapolate a little bit of what Bear World's history was like based on what their pop culture is. This means that they did have piracy in the history of Bear World. This means that they must have had some form of the Caribbean in Bear World based on who these pirates are. This means that piracy existed, but because we know that Bear World exists without an African slave trade, we know that piracy must have developed differently because don't fool yourself. Pirates dealt in enslaved Africans. Like that's part of the history of piracy. I mean, there was money to be made. There was illicit business going on. They did dip their toes in it. Don't doubt that. So pirates definitely developed parallel to ours, but must have been a different timeline. The Cubs only know as much about pirates, though, as most children in the human world know. All hands on deck, shouted Brother. Run up the Jolly Roger. Now, the Jolly Roger is usually portrayed as a skull and crossbones in popular culture. But from what we know about Jolly Roger, there were all kinds of Jolly Rogers. Jolly Rogers were just pirate flags. Usually they were just solid black flags. Now, no one really knows when and how this started, but a lot of scholars, and by a lot I mean the one or two that I actually looked up, think that the black pirate flag might have started with Muslim pirates, which is interesting. There were a lot of Muslim pirates out there. The black flag had special significance for them, and then it was adopted. Jolly Rogers, on the other hand, they could have been black. Many were red, and the skull and cross. A lot of the skull and crossbones stuff was attributed to pirates in like later on. I do have so I was looking up about skulls and crossbones, and I found a skull and crossbones. I found a skull and crossbones that I really liked. Where is it? This was a famous. So when they would talk about Jolly Rogers, different pirates had different Jolly Roger flags, and a testimony from a man who was captured by pirates in 1724 witnessed a pirate flag with a skeleton stabbing a heart with a spear, which the pirates called Jolly Roger, being risen on the ship's mast. And so I'm going to show you. So that if you're listening to this, I'm sorry you can't see it, but just look up like skeleton stabbing heart Jolly Roger, and you'll be able to see this. It's one of my favorite flags. Okay, so it's, for those of you at home, it's a skeleton with like horns or a crown, and he's holding what looks like a goblet in one hand and a spear in the other, and he's stabbing like a cartoon heart. Like, it's a heart. And then there's a couple of dots, red dots. It must be like blood drops. I don't know. It's a pretty busy flag. I can see where most pirates would be like, I mean, from far away, can you even tell what this thing is? Like, just keep the black flag or fly like the skull and crossbones or just a skull or something. This is a busy design. It's a busy design. Like, when I first heard about it, I had this image of like a more like logo-esque design, like a symbolic design. This is a cartoon of a skeleton stabbing a heart, and I love it to death. It's my favorite thing in the world. I absolutely love the skeleton stabbing the heart. But there's a lot of testimonies like that. Like, if you go out and read like testimonies from people, and there's also histories of Jolly Rogers. Charles Johnson wrote a book, A General History of the Pirates, which was published in 1724. And he said that two pirate captains had flags they called Jolly Roger. Bartholomew Roberts in 1721 and Francis Spriggs in 1723. They both called their flags the Jolly Roger. But they were different flags. Neither of them had skulls and crossbones. So that meant that like pirates had already adopted the term as their flag. But the notion of the skulls and crossbones hadn't come along. And no one can really agree on why it's called Jolly Roger. Some say that there was a flag called the Old Roger that a pirate named John Quelch used. And some say that the French, the Joli Rouge, which means pretty red flag. Some people thought that like the red flag on certain privateers' boats, they called them Joli Rouge. But there's no that's one of those like reverse, and like we're gonna sort of backtrack, like try to reconstruct the origin of this phrase with no real proof. There's no documents that support that notion. But 1687 was one of the earliest reports of a skull and crossbones being used. In a logbook entry, Emmanuel Wynne, a French pirate captain, was credited as using the skull and crossbones with an hourglass underneath it, like an hourglass shape, like kind of a Black Widow shape underneath it. Then there's like skulls with swords crossed underneath them. There's red flags with skulls and crossed bones on them. In fact, there was a lot of red flags with skulls and crossed bones. So by no means was this like a stereotypical thing. There was pirates would fly their flag, so you would know the pirates are coming. You better get ready to give up. But it was by no means what we think of as the Jolly Roger. And in this book, we are going to see that there are actually, Mike went out of his way to draw a different Jolly Roger, even though the Cubs have the Jolly Roger flag and Brother's wearing a Jolly Roger hat, which he must have gotten from Garfield because it's kind of the hat that Garfield wears in Garfield's Halloween Adventure. So, yeah. So they raise the Jolly Roger. And he says, man the halyards, prepare to go about. And the Cubs are like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it means turn the ship around. Now set sail for the Spanish Main. And they're like, the Spanish, huh? And he's like, I don't know. I'm just repeating things that I heard in cartoons, which is fine. That's how imagination works. Hoist the mainsail, avast ye swabs, and Sister says, you're good at pirate talk. And he says, "Ngar, thank you, matey." Again, that's not really what pirates talk like. Also, pirates weren't the only ones who said these things. Sailors said these things. Now, as far as like swabs, as far as like pirates went, what is a pirate swab? A swab is a disrespectful term for one of your sailors, a seaman. And the reason you would call them a swab is it referenced the fact that they had been like relegated to cleaning the deck. You were a swabby. You were someone who swabbed the deck. And so you would call someone a swab. It's just kind of like a way to it's a way to tear someone down in order to build yourself up, because pirates had a lot of probably low self-esteems. So brother calls them swabs, even though that's like a disrespectful term. And then he says, land ho, 5 points off the port bow. He doesn't know what it means. They see a tropical island. They land. They find an X on the ground marking the spot. This is obviously this is a tropical island somewhere maybe in near South America. I'm not sure. There's coconuts, so somewhere off South America. There's monkeys. There's parrots and all kinds of birds. Cockatoos. I don't know. There's also an X on the ground. Pirates didn't really bury their treasure. I mean, that's been everyone knows this by now. Pirates didn't bury treasure. That would have made no sense. Even in Treasure Island, the reason the treasure is there, it's complicated. There's a lot of story behind it. As has been pointed out many times, pirates wouldn't go to the trouble of burying treasure. First of all, pirates didn't tend to haul around a lot of gold. Pirates tended to haul around a lot of perishable items and things that people needed, because that's tended to be what got sent around. There wasn't a whole lot of gold on the sea. I mean, gold did have to be transported, but it was super heavy. Gold was heavy. And why transport a lot? The amount of gold you could transport, considering the weight of gold, you may as well just have goods, dry goods that you can sell and trade. You can carry a lot more of that stuff. In any case, they didn't bury their treasure. Why would they do that? But they do in the cartoons and they do in the books. They dig up where the X marks the spot, and they find a treasure chest filled with gold and jewels, comic books, and chocolate bars. That's a real treasure chest. I agree. But all of a sudden, they're set upon by pirates. And brother's like, pirates? If there's anything I hate, it's pirates. Rotten, lousy, smelly pirates. And sister's like, but we're pirates. And he's like, oh, yeah. We'll put on all sail. We'll outrun them. Now, what I love about this is it's almost as if the Cubs are attacked by real pirates. So the real pirates who are attacking them, they have a Jolly Roger that's a white flag with a black skull and crossed swords on it. It's also flying a red flag. Its sails are tattered and patched. It's in pretty rough shape. We never see the actual pirates on the enemy pirate ship. But, yeah. So we never see these pirates. They're just sort of left to our imagination. I haven't even described what brother and sister look like. I want to point out that brother is missing a leg. He has a peg leg. So he's more of a Captain Ahab type. Sister is missing a hand. She has a hook hand. So she is more of a Captain Hook type. And Honey Bear, I was going to say is missing an eye, but she's not. She's just wearing a patch over one eye, which is, is fine. That's a good pirate costume. Pirates didn't wear patches over their eyes because they were missing an eye, by the way. I mean, some may have. Pirates wore a patch over their eye during when battles were coming up, or they were going to take over another ship. They were going to capture a ship. You put a patch over your eye so that when you go down into the hold, if you have to go down into the hold, you would then move the patch over to your other eye, because this eye would then be the pupil of your eye would have dilated. So when you move the patch over, when you go into a dark space, now this eye is already adjusted to the dark. That's a little trick pirates knew. And then once this eye got adjusted, you could take up the patch. It's a little. You were ready for fighting in dim lighting. That's why pirates wore a patch. At least that's what I've always heard. People in the audience, let me know if I'm wrong. They hit a fog bank, they jump overboard, and they land back in reality. The Cubs are like, we were playing pirates on an old fishing boat. Papa's caught a fish. They're going to have lunch. They run off to the cottage to eat some fish. And the parents are like, so what'd you guys do? They're like, well, we played pirates. It was fun. And Mama says, what were you guys up to? And they're like, wow, it was like this. And then they relate their pirate adventure. Also, they're eating the fish, and it looks so good. Papa has caught an enormous fish, right? And it's always weird in Berenstain Bear books because, like, the crab down below is waving hello to the Cubs, and you see it earlier with, like, a sort of a angry look on its face. But you're also aware that they could have eaten that crab. This fish has a face, and in the next page, that face is gone, and so is much of the fish. It's been cut into, and you see its insides. I'm just saying, like, the push and pull between animal and sentient thinking being is hilarious in this book series. So that's the Berenstain Bears Pirate Adventure. There's no questions at the end, of course. There's nothing to talk about. It's just the Cubs having a good time playing pirates. But I like the story of pirates. I like the history of pirates. I like learning about, you know me. I have this insatiable desire. I'm completely ADHD, and I need to constantly be putting new information into my brain so that I don't get bored, so that I don't get depressed, so that I don't get sad, so that I don't get anxious. That's part of my self-care, is just stuffing my brain full of useless information. And that's why I like, and then regurgitating it back at you. I read a lot more about pirates. I'm not going to just talk about pirates this whole time, even though it's a book all about pirates. But if you want to know more about pirates, Eric J. Dolan has a book called Black Flags, Blue Waters, The Epic History of America's Most Notorious Pirates. So this is about the pirates who operated out of America's English colonies, or who were operating just off America's coast from the 1680s to 1726, and kind of about their relationship with the colonies at the time. So that's it's fascinating. If you want to take a look at it, it's a period of American history that we don't usually learn a lot about, like the pirates, like just sort of like how that trade, what all was going on there. You can also look up A General History of the Pirates by Captain Charles Johnson. It's a book that was actually published in 1724. That's the one we mentioned it earlier. It's considered the granddaddy of all pirate books. Focuses on the pirates who sailed between the late 1710s and the mid 1720s, but it goes into the late 1600s, and it's where we get a lot of information about Henry Avery, Blackbeard, Captain Kidd, Stede Bonnet, and Sam Bellamy. We also have Under the Black Flag, The Romance and the Reality of Life Among the Pirates. And that's a book from the mid-90s. You may remember it. You'll recognize the cover if you see it. I think I have a copy of it downstairs. And it's the book that kind of was like, you're getting it all wrong. You're getting it all wrong. Here's what being a pirate was really like. So it's not a chronological history, but it's got a lot of interesting information about pirates. We have Captain Kidd and the war against the pirates. We have the Republic of Pirates being the true and surprising story of the Caribbean pirates and the man who brought them down. And so we get a lot of Blackbeard and Charles Vane and Sam Bellamy and that. Blackbeard is a whole other story. If you want to know about a pirate city, like what was it like to live in a pirate city, like just a town of just pirates, go into the history of Blackbeard. Most of what you know about Blackbeard was poppycock, but he was still a fascinating guy. And then Pirates on the Chesapeake, being a true history of pirates, picaroons and raiders on Chesapeake Bay, 1610 to 1807. And obviously it's about the Chesapeake Bay region. It's by Donald Chomet. And it talks a lot about how society was influenced by the piracy going on at the time. So I didn't even talk about like outlaw. Pirates were considered outlaws. And outlawry was like this whole other thing, like in Greek and British history, like being an outlaw, like that was a legal term, and pirates were considered outlaws under British law. And if you were considered like outlaw was like the worst thing that could happen to you. It was basically it's like a death sentence, because being an outlaw was, again, actual legal term. It meant the law no longer applied to you. Not that you could get away with anything. It meant you were no longer under the protection of any sort of law. people could kill you with impunity and nobody would do anything about it. Nobody knew anything about it. They had to declare that they killed you, but that's it. It just meant that you no longer were protected by the law. You were no longer a person. You were given nothing. You were given nothing. You were a pariah. It was basically just permanent exile everywhere. And you may as well have been dead. So we may as well jump on the sea and join the pirates because they were all outlaws anyway. And that's the Berenstain Bears Pirate Adventure. Read about pirates, learn about pirates, watch some pirate movies. Pirates are fascinating. Just an incredible long history. And pirates still exist. Clearly, we know pirates still exist. There's oceans, there's pirates. That's just what happens. There's going to be people out there. They're not jolly singing, dancing characters either. They're rough. They rough and tumble. A lot of them are just people trying to make their way. A lot of pirates come from countries that have fairly corrupt governments themselves. So it's that whole I could be miserable on land or I could be miserable on the sea, and at least on sea I stand a chance of making some money. Piracy is just another one of those criminal activities that is born of what choice do I? A lot of times it's just what choice do I have? My options are limited. So that's me, old bleeding heart Phil here, standing up for the pirates. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're watching me on YouTube, thank you so much for watching me. You can listen to my other shows. I have a show called It's Del Toro Time that I do with Willow. She's sick this week, but we still put out an episode. And in fact, we're putting one up. I think we're putting one up on YouTube as well, but I forgot to record myself. You'll only see her in the recording. It didn't work out. It was weird. It didn't work out. But we're covering a Ramsey Campbell short story. And if you like horror, Ramsey Campbell's your guy. So check that out. The guy wrote 30 some novels, over 300 and some short stories. He's still alive. He's in his 80s. He's still writing and publishing today. So check out Ramsey Campbell if you like good old British. Speaking of weird accents, he's from Liverpool. Speaking of British horror. And then at some point, Christy and I will be back with Pizza Toast, so check that out. If you haven't listened to Pizza Toast, listen to it. We talk about kids stuff. It's fun. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being awesome. And I'll see you all next time. Let me pull up my music. Deep in Bear Country.